Welcome once again to Leto's Law. Here's Steve Leto.
Every now and then you're on the road and you see someone driving and you ask yourself, how'd they get a driver's license? But they probably took a test and passed one a long time ago and just have gotten sloppy since then, right? Well, Paul said, check this one out, by Tim Nicholas of CBS News. 3 New York DMV employees and a driving school busted in driver's license scheme, according to a DA there. Prosecutors say 3 New York State Department of Motor Vehicles examiners schemed with a driving school to help people get licenses without ever having to take the proper tests. And in doing so, they made thousands of dollars along the way. The scary part here is that when people are getting their licenses without taking the proper tests, there's a good chance they're doing it because they couldn't pass them. Somebody must know that, because these tests aren't that hard, Detectives say the driving school in Queens charged people up to $2,000 each to falsify driving exams. Investigators say the school's owner worked with 3 DMV examiners and a substitute driver who posed as other people to take the tests. So some guy'd come in and take the test for somebody else. Prosecutors say the scheme may have allowed hundreds, if not thousands, of people to get licenses. The district attorney said countless individuals are now driving on our roads without ever having demonstrated the basic skills to do it safely. Right now, people in that area are going, okay, that explains a lot. Just yesterday, I was approaching a roundabout. There was not another car in sight except for the one in front of me that stopped at the entrance to the roundabout. And the person stopped and was looking around. There was not a car to be seen by them anywhere except for me behind them going, what do you stop for? And then a little more of this. And they pulled very slowly in and drove really, really slowly around and went out. No understanding of how those things work. No comprehension. Investigators say they cracked the case using undercover cameras and an undercover NYPD officer who paid the school $1,600 to pass the test. I love those undercover camera videos where they get people on camera doing this kind of stuff because you know darn well it's really hard to argue with the camera. A short time ago, our undercover, who never took the test, was told by the school he passed and was getting a license. Hey, congratulations. The DMV now says it has begun the process of revoking the driving privileges of any customers of that scheme. These individuals often did not speak or understand English and may have believed they were taking legitimate necessary steps, says the acting deputy special agent in charge of Homeland Security investigations. Now, here is the thing. I hate to talk about language skills here because for some odd reason, if I mention someone not speaking English, I'll get accused of being racist. And it is simply a fact that some people speak English and some people do not. That it's hard to argue with that as a basic proposition. And I'm here to tell you that, for instance, my great-grandparents who came to America from Finland, I don't believe any of them spoke a word of English, or maybe a word or two, okay? But they were fluent native speakers of the Finnish language, okay? How it was. So if somebody came to America for whatever reason, and let's assume they're here legally, but they speak zero English, and so they come in and somehow communicate to these people, need to get a driver's license. And now the people running the school think, okay, we got to figure out what language they're speaking and then teach them and then have them take and pass the test. Or we can just say, hey, pay $1,600, we'll get you a license. You wonder if the people doing that realize that what they're doing is illegal because the school presumably is authorized on some level to conduct these tests. So when you go to somebody who's in a quasi-official role like that, and they go, yes, we are authorized to conduct these tests and exams and so on and so forth, and here's how it works. You pay us the money, and we give you the license. I can see that as at least as being a defense. It might not mean that people get off scot-free. I mean, obviously, they don't get to keep their license. But do you lock them up and throw them in prison? Or does that mitigate their circumstances a little bit? It might. The DMV says it has already made changes and will be making more improvements to ensure something like this doesn't happen again. adding that the employees involved have all been either fired or are on leave without pay, and they're no longer doing road tests. But, there was a move a few years ago to privatize a lot of this. And I was always worried that things were going to happen. So when I was growing up, and by the way, a lot of my audience can relate with this because many of you are the same demographic as me. And I went and took driver's ed during the summer when I was 15 years old from the local high school. It was offered by the Board of Education in the city I lived in. And virtually everyone I knew my age, all my friends, took driver's ed at the local high school. And then when they had a permit, they drove around a bit with a parent or somebody in the car who was licensed and whoever was allowed to do that. And then when you turned 16, you went and got the license. And you did the license by making an appointment and going to the Secretary of State's office in Michigan. And then you would take a written test and you would take a driving test, both of which were administered by an employee of the Secretary of State's office. So the school, you took that there, and there was no charge for that. That was just built into the education. And then the stuff conducted by the state was conducted by the state. And you didn't pay a ton of money for it to happen. You paid whatever the cost was to get your driver's license. I don't think the test had any extra money tacked onto it. And so years ago, they said, this will save school districts money by offloading this one requirement that we teach kids how to drive. So what we'll do, and this is what we did in Michigan, is we said we're going to take that out of the public schools and we're going to allow driving schools to open up, and the driving schools can conduct a lot of what needs to be done. The classroom instruction, the road training, a lot of that stuff. And then after you've done so much schooling, you get a certain kind of a permit. And then after you've driven a while on that, you get the second permit and you're done with the schooling. And of course, the school makes money. And of course, the school's got to make money. That's why they exist. But the point is that was extracted from the public school budgets and just as a cost saving. And I have an understanding why they did that and how that works. But I think we all suspected this kind of stuff was going to happen because once you privatize it, the oversight of it changes. Now, there were people from the DMV involved in this, but it was also a private driving school that appears to be behind this as well. So the DMV commissioner also applauded the employees who assisted in the case. And a couple weeks ago, I posted a 2-part video I shot where I interviewed Ed Bolian of VinWiki. I interviewed him on my channel because I've been interviewed on his channel 11 times so far, but I've got a few more videos coming up this year where I sat in his studio and we talked about cars. And one of the things I asked him was, I set the question up by telling him I've known people, young people, and I've asked them, about driver's licenses. And I've met 18-year-olds who are like, I've got a license. And they don't seem to be in a rush to get one. And when I was 15, I was in a rush to get one. And to me, that was like the most important thing I did the year I turned 16. I got my driver's license. It was a big deal. And I've talked to youngsters, and I say, you haven't got a driver's license. And they say, well, number one, the school costs a bunch of money. The schooling does. It takes a bunch of time. And I can get rides from friends or an Uber. And I say, you can't do that forever, though, can you? I mean, I know in some parts of the country, you might be able to get around with, mass transit, okay? But if you live in Michigan and you're driving around all kinds of big, wide open spaces, the driver's license will come in handy. You might need a car, too, but another story altogether. The point is that when they said, you take driver's ed at school, it is free, everyone just took it because it was part of the curriculum. It was part of the education. I personally think that it should be back in the curriculum and it should be a graded subject. Because I think to get around in America in most places, a driver's license and the skills to drive a car are important life skills you should have so that you don't wind up pulling up to a roundabout going, how does this work? There's a yield sign there, but the road goes both directions, but round? And if I go straight, I got to go over this thing in the middle? That doesn't look like you should be doing that. Now, there's a car behind me, but he can wait while I figure this out. It's round. How do you go? I need to turn left. I got to turn right to turn left. So that's my take on it. But again, Paul, thanks for sending this. Paul's a good friend of mine. CBS News ran the story, and Tim Nicholas wrote it. 3 New York DMV employees and a driving school have been busted in a driver's license scheme, according to a DA in Staten Island. But he says that as a result of this, there might be hundreds and hundreds of unqualified drivers who got their licenses fraudulently on the road right now, sharing the road with you. There you go. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Leto's Law. I say good day.